Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Getting Hammered. I am your host, Mary Catherine Ham. I'm here with my co-host, Vic Mattis of the Washington Free Beacon. We are your morning show for any hour. We got a lot going on in this presidential race, and we won't focus solely on that, but a lot, because there's a lot going on. But before we get to all of that and some SCOTUS news, let's check in with Vic. How are you doing, Vic?
Hello, Mary Catherine. I'm doing fine, but I do have to start off on a somber note. An obituary, an in memoriam. Sonny Bunch texted me this, and then Matt Continetti texted me the next day. It's very sad news. BLT steak in D.C. is now closed.
Oh, no.
Yes, on I Street. Look at that. Jennifer's jaw just dropped. What is she going to do now? What is Michelle Obama going to do? So,
was that her fave place? I didn't know that.
Yes, this was her place. The Obamas loved it, but Michelle in particular. And then there was that one time where she was there, and then I forget whoever the other celebrity was there at the same time, and it was crazy. Those were the days. This is part of a disturbing trend of restaurants downtown that are closing. And, you know, I mean, this happens a little bit in other cities like New York, but more so in Washington because it's mostly federal employees that make up the sort of the working, you know, of downtown, the employees that come to downtown, and they're not going to work, as you know. The government has not forced them to come back 5 days a week. So lots of the city is a ghost town now. Prior to this, McCormick and Schmick on K Street, which was a popular place in the 90s when it first came out, that finally closed.
Interesting.
And now BLT. My one memory... I have two memories about McCormick and Schmick first, and then we'll get to BLT and the others. But one was, I remember John Podhoretz telling me how you couldn't get into McCormick and Schmick at the time when it opened. It was the seafood place.
I think when I came to town 20 years ago now, that was the hot.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was it, right? You couldn't get in. And he was able to, as a walk-in, got seated. He was with Fred Barnes and Britt Hume. In the 90s, you know,
well,
in
look
the
at that.
90s. And so I was like, wow, that's a big deal. Okay. The second thing is, before I dated Kate, I got invited to dinner at McCormick and Schmick's with her and her mother.
Okay.
And I didn't know that tuna could be served like rare. You know how tuna is like rare tuna? I didn't know that at the time.
You'd only had it out of a can up until this point.
I mean, it was like a tuna steak is like cooked like thick and dry. So they serve it, and I see it's red, and it starts becoming, I don't know what the word is, psychosomatic, whatever, where you start thinking, oh my gosh, I'm eating like raw fish, and this is a mistake, and I start sweating. I'm thinking I'm going to be sick at any moment. I asked them to bring it back to cook it a little more. I was so basic. I've never done that.
Sent it back.
I did, because I was like, I think this is, and I didn't realize until later that, you know, you can have it like a steak, like medium rare, and nothing, of course, happened, but I was sweated out the next 3 hours.
We're witnessing the creation of a foodie, right?
Education.
This
Education.
predated his foodieism.
Yes, that's right. But the other thing is, when I think about BLT steak, it is weird how sometimes these restaurants that are favorites of presidents,
right,
and their coterie, over time, they close. It's very weird. Do you remember DC Coast?
Oh, yeah.
That was on 16th. That was a favorite popular Clinton hangout.
That had a cool inside. I liked
it was
the
a huge
decor.
Hall.
Yes.
And then, of course, Trump liked BLT Prime at the Trump Hotel, which is, of course, now Jose
Defunct.
Andres.
Yes.
So anyway, rest in peace to BLT.
I've been there at least once, I know.
They had wonderful popovers that were complimentary. It was a big to-do. Now there are only like 30 steakhouses left in D.C. So I'm kidding. There's only one, and it's the Palm.
What shall we do?
What shall we do? There's only one or two that matter.
That tuna story reminds me of, there's a scene in Friday Night Lights where star football player Tim Riggins from the wrong side of the tracks goes out to eat with his cheerleader girlfriend's family, who is quite well-to-do at the country club, and he orders squab rare. And the whole family's like, you don't, nope.
Yeah. Any sort of chicken, poultry, you must be wary.
Rare pigeon is what he ordered. That's what that reminds me.
That's how they did on the other side of this truck stuff.
You know, I went to, we're getting into very local content.
I'm sorry. People outside of the Beltway are like, please, I'm going to have to hit the skip button.
It is true that in town, though, the joints that presidents frequent
Yeah.
get sort of this aura
Oh.
about them, and a lot of people want to go. And so the fact that even the ones that the Obamas enjoyed are shutting down feels like a bad sign.
It is a bad sign.
But I went to the wharf the other night, which I don't
Yes,
do
of course.
often,
Oh,
and it
my
was quite
goodness.
hopping.
Yeah.
The wharf is hopping.
Yeah.
Which is good because I always thought in this town they have this huge waterfront area
They did
that
for
no one was really doing anything with except for that awesome fresh
seafood
seafood
market. You can get a
yes.
seafood. I've been there at the time.
Which
It was just a seafood
Some
market.
of it remains, right? I think
yes,
the
I
seafood
believe
market
so.
remains.
Hopefully.
But yeah, there's a lot of stuff down there now.
Oh.
So I guess if you're willing to risk the carjacking, which I was on that night. And
No, I mean, yeah, because you do have these spurts of crime, and there it happens in that area because it's So.
I've been due to our affinity for restaurants.
Yes.
I have been sort of tracking this story, but reported a couple places about all the chains closing down.
Yes.
Have you seen this? Like
Yes, of
TGI
course.
Fridays has closed numerous locations across
no.
the U.S. Denny's shut down 57 restaurants in 2023. Boston Market reduced from 300 to 27, which is a real loss for me because I love Boston Market.
Did we have a Boston Market conversation before? Because
Oh, because I
what
said
do
I'd have it cater my
but
wedding.
It's like a family meal. It's not like fried chicken. It's like a turkey.
It's
like
fantastic.
turkey and
Yes.
yeah.
Meat and three from
It's-
Boston Market is a great
Meat and
meal.
three. That's 3 sides.
Yes.
It's like Thanksgiving every day.
There's a couple others.
TGI Fridays.
They announced the
that's too
shuttering
bad.
of 41 locations of Outback Steakhouse, Carrabba's Italian Grill, and Bonefish Grill in February. A lot is happening in the restaurant market.
There is. It's hard to keep track. Alan Stillman was the great restaurateur, and he was the brains behind many restaurants, including high-end steak places like Smith and Walensky. And all those kind of steakhouses that had 2 names, a lot of it was just phone book style. Like, we'll just find 2 cool names. But they were not anybody. It's not like 2 named after famous people.
Right.
It's just marketing. But Alan Stillman's first great claim to fame was he wanted to create a place that was for young singles to hang out after work, a bar, restaurant place. It's sort of casual, not too formal, but not a dive. And then the result was TGI Fridays.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
there you go.
But rest in peace, because I don't know. I know Jennifer's wondering where's she going to go for the giant goblet of the mudslide.
She needs
Yeah, you need that
she's
one.
She's going to need a
It's
new
like
place.
a shake
Because
with alcohol.
everyone knows that's where the hip kids go. Okay. Anyway, it turns out there
please.
were consequences for shutting down the whole economy. And here we see them
that's right.
playing out. What's going on with me? The child has stayed in the crib mostly, so we're doing pretty good.
Mostly.
Steve is back from a work trip
Yes.
to assist with the kids staying in the crib. Here's the thing: if she gets up when she's done sleeping, I don't care. I just don't want her jumping out while we're trying to get them to nap or bedtime. So I haven't had to scare her yet. You guys will all be glad if there are those of you out there who are gentle parents who were worried about me jumping down her throat.
So you're sitting. You actually are now
I
sitting.
continue
You
to
pull
lie
up,
and wait.
Pull out a chair. You're sitting in the hall.
Yeah.
And it's probably
I
dark,
don't have
except
I don't
for
have a chair. How old am I? 60?
I-
I sit on the floor.
sit on the floor, in the dark with like the glow of your phone. That's scary.
Yeah,
That's
it
scary.
is
You
scary.
come out, just see this glow.
It is scary. So I haven't had to do that. She's seemed compliant about like, hey, it's time to go to bed now. She does climb out in the mornings,
Okay.
and then she goes and throws things in her brother's crib. But thus far, they haven't been hard things.
Okay.
Right. So I think we're in a good place.
They start all waking up. Then
She
together.
did push her brother off of a play structure the other day. I am pretty sure it is like one of those things where
Yes.
it's like a horror movie about a scary kid where you're like, you turn your back and suddenly the other kid's on the ground and you're like, did you do that?
He fell
And
on.
she's like,
he
I
fell on
was
his
just
own.
climbing, Mom.
Right.
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's the. Do you remember the Macaulay? Speaking of Macaulay Culkin, that great Home Alone movie. I love the part with the pizza delivery guy. By the way, he was. Thank you for those on Twitter who pointed out and sent the video of that scene that I do not remember. He was also in that really dark movie called The Good Son.
The Good Son.
You-
That's when he and Elijah Wood were taking their turn to dark, more
Oh my
serious
gosh.
cinema at
Yeah.
that moment.
Oh,
Okay.
so scary.
At any rate, my child is taking her turn to dark, more serious cinema.
Oh, no.
And I looked over and I was like, huh, She's looking at me like, no, I cannot tell you what just happened here. Well, I don't know what transpired.
Right, the shrug.
And I'm like, it's funny because he doesn't usually fall. He's pretty sure-footed. But you know what? I do not have the evidence to come to conclusions on that. So I'm slandering her as I speak.
But no, this happens. I remember my son years later admitting that he had drawn on the wall and he blamed it on his sister because she couldn't speak. She could walk around. And so I remember chewing her out and yelling at her about it. And she looked confused. And my son's like, I don't know. That was pretty bad.
Her brother is large. So there's only so much she's going to be able to do to him for so long.
Yeah, the window.
So I guess you should get her licks in now.
Yeah, that's right.
Because he's a big kid.
That's right.
All right. But we're monitoring the situation.
Good.
Nobody worry. Speaking of monitoring the situation. Before we get into everything, I will add a little programming note. I am on Meghan McCain's podcast this week and on Barry Weiss's Honestly, where I'm talking about raising girls versus boys, which is a very problematic subject. But you can talk about problematic subjects like having two genders on Honestly with Barry Weiss and her wife, Nellie Bowles. They are having a second child who is a boy. And so she was talking about differences between them. So you can tune in for that. And I am in the New York Times for a conversation with Jane Coaston about being an online conservative personality.
Like, what's that like?
In these times.
What's it like?
Well, just like about the incentive structure and are we, the idea that being an influencer often online on the right, and I think probably on the left, this is incentivized too, but particularly on the right, you can just make a lot of loud noise and outrageous statements and lose a lot, and that still pays, and how that's a problem. Okay, so.
Exciting.
Shall we move on to the news?
Let's do it.
Alrighty. Well, the 2024 race continues to be unpredictable, Vic, because the Republicans are going to go have their convention next week. And when they have their convention, at which they will name their official nominee, Donald Trump, and he will name his official VP, they might not know who they're running against. Yeah. Because it seems a little up in the air. Let me just open with Jon Stewart talking about the lay of the land right now.
The debate, it's been quite interesting, actually. Many Democrats have expressed concern that the president has a hard time expressing thoughts. And then there is this other camp who thinks that those people should shut the up.
Stop this whining, stop the complaining, stop trying to be the cool, cynical kids.
I would not want to be in a foxhole with any of the people who, were clutching their pearls all of a sudden.
Pearl clutching and hand wringing. We're bedwetting and soaking all the way through the mattress.
We panic and piss our pants.
So that's the scene in the Democratic conversation, which Trump, to his credit, has still not stomped on. He is allowing them to have this torturous argument amongst themselves. He had a rally in Doral, Florida, with Marco Rubio, largely sort of a positive vibe from Trump, who I think is feeling himself a little bit after that debate. And with these sort of consistent small lead in polls. So I liked the vibe.
Yeah, it's funny. I saw a Democratic strategist on CNN saying, we should be talking about Donald Trump. He's not doing any campaigning. He's just at a golf club. Notice he's not saying anything. I'm like, I think that's intentional.
They're going to try to basement campaign Donald Trump.
He's just playing golf. We should be talking about that. Yeah, that's right.
Good luck with that. Yeah. Okay, but here's a sticking point for the old Democrats who do want him out. And we'll talk about some very prominent ones who spoke about that this week or who wrote about that for the New York Times this week. There's a new Washington Post, ABC News Ipsos poll that finds the race tied. So now, inside that poll, you will also find that more than half of Democrats say President Joe Biden should end his reelection campaign because of his catastrophic debate performance. This is Politico reporting. Though he remains tied with President Donald Trump, 56% of Democrats and 67% of all Americans believe Biden should withdraw given his performance in the debate, the poll found. So some good news and some bad news, but the good news for Biden is that if there is a tied poll top line, he can cling to that quite reasonably.
Right. And make the case between the hours of 10 and 4. Right. AM, by the way, not PM.
And we should say we will get blown up by news of the day, as we always do,
Yeah.
because the president has planned a press conference for this early evening, I believe around 6-ish.
Right.
So we'll have more on that in the future. However, we'll do the state of play as it is.
We could also anticipate what's going to happen. So if you're listening right now, yes, we too were shocked that the president decided to announce his resignation at the NATO summit. It was amazing, wasn't it?
Perhaps it was George Clooney who pushed him to do so.
Oh.
George Clooney wrote in the New York Times, "I love Joe Biden, but we need a new nominee."
Mm-hmm.
Now, this was taken as like a huge blow to Biden when this came out.
Yeah, he's no longer following him on X. That's what they say.
Is that a real thing?
Somebody said that, yeah.
Okay, a couple things. The Democrats still don't have a plan for this switcheroo that they would like to do.
Yes.
And an op-ed from George Clooney, although he speaks for a powerful group of donors and Democratic voters, and probably is a stalking horse for Obama's feelings.
Yes.
An op-ed from Clooney is not a plan.
Right.
It's just an op-ed.
There was a paragraph in this op-ed. Everybody's talking about the George Clooney op-ed in the New York Times, and they all have the same thing. They'll say, but what stood out to me was blank.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is it's a bunch of different things. There's so many things in that op-ed that have people going crazy in different directions. So I'll just pick one right now, and then we could do the others. And also, I definitely talk about what's happening among Democrats who are the tally between those who are pro Biden and those who think that he should not seek re-election. I keep on thinking it's favoring one versus the other, and then it shifts back every day.
Right.
But with the Clooney thing, you mentioned the plan. It might not be the penultimate graph, but certainly lower in the op-ed is the throwaway line about the conversations, the sort of town hall style conversations we can have with everybody, he says. Kamala Harris, Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, Josh Shapiro. He mentions even Governor Pritzker of Illinois.
And Andy Beshear
of Kentucky. And I thought, well, at the very least, it is worth having the American people wonder if they want to be more like California and Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
But making that magically happen is quite different than the actual...
No, he says we can easily foresee a group of several strong Democrats stepping forward to stand and tell us why they're best qualified. You can't easily foresee that.
No.
It would require planning.
Yeah. His other emphasis, this is very interesting, and you wonder who he is talking to when he wrote this, is that unlike the Republicans, we don't believe in these heirs to the throne and cults of personality. You know, Kamala's there, and she's like, I'm right here. What are you doing to me? I'm the vice president of the United States.
There's a couple other motivations. On the Kamala front, a lot of these people, Wes Moore, a lot of these governors, who are the future of the party, presumably, are motivated perhaps to stand behind Joe Biden, who might lose, and take Kamala with him. Because they don't want to stand.
I said in the last show,
right?
Definitely, yeah.
So all of them are speaking out on that front. Speaking of motivations, Clooney is also mad and has been vocally upset with the Biden White House because it did not back Amal Clooney's ICC, International Criminal Court, proceedings against the state of Israel. So he has a bit of an axe to grind. The thing that stood out to me in the op-ed was that he admits that at this fundraiser where President Joe Biden was taken by the wrist and led off stage by Obama, which I thought Obama could have done more delicately if he wanted to cover this up, which they all did.
Clearly he needed it now.
Yeah. But the admission is, okay, yeah, he wasn't the guy that I used to know. The diminishment was obvious. And what's interesting about that is that George Clooney didn't say that a month ago. And even though all of the press was yelling at all of us to tell us that we were cheap faking, none of them heard from Clooney about it or reported that he was in a diminished state at that point.
Their seeing him at the debate was not a surprise because they had seen him up close and personal at the fundraiser.
Right.
I've said this. We've said this before. Other friends of ours have said this. It's not primarily about the health of the president and can he go on, let alone re-election, but even now until January, it's about winning. And our candidate is down by a couple points. We think he's going to lose. We need to switch him out, even though 14 million people, not that they had a much of a choice, but they chose Biden, and he has those, delegates, could free them. And as a result, they're having this problem now because, again, we know about it, and they're acting like they're surprised about this.
Well,
but it's just it's what I want. I mean, really, it's just either they're naive or they're complicit, and he knew.
Dumb or liars is the question. Meghan McArdle actually wrote a good piece in the Washington Post today saying, "Hey, guys, and she's a libertarian-ish writer at the Post, so she's outside of the ideological norm there, and that's why she's able to write a column like this. But she said, hey, we should probably face up to the fact that our viewers and readers were not as informed about this issue as Fox News and right-leaning outlets' viewers and readers were, because the conformity in our newsrooms is so great that they don't see stories like this. And that's not a good thing for our readers and listeners. So she's dead on about that. And had the press reported on this energetically when it started to become more obvious, they could have had a competitive primary.
I remembered my point because, as you could tell in my last response, I was like, going around aimlessly. I just lost my train of thought, much like Biden. So I understand. I'm sympathetic. Also, I like the hours of 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. That's basically how I work.
I'm starting the campaign to oust you now.
I remember. Thank you. That's right. It's time for a new co-host. My question, I had a question for you.
Yes.
If Biden, we saw the debate, it was disastrous. We all saw it. There's no denying what our eyes saw. If he was still up +5, would the press be demanding and the Democrats be demanding we need a new candidate? If he was up +5.
No.
That's all about winning.
That's why the tie matters, because he doesn't believe that he needs to step aside, and he needs to believe it. Or they need to make a deal to buy him and his family off. Which, by the way, Matt Iglesias said very clearly.
Work?
No. Matt Iglesias said very clearly on Twitter. It surprised me. He said, hey, donors who would like to get him out understand that this is about this family's station moving forward and their ability to make money, so you might want to make a deal.
In what sense?
I'll
pay you not to run?
Here's the tweet. Whether or not he's the nominee, Joe Biden's not going to be president a year from now, and Hunter Biden is going to need a source of income. Donors who want to see a change need to cut a deal.
I can only imagine what the comments are to that.
Yikes.
Because that's pretty
But it's strange because,
and blunt.
Why wouldn't Hunter have an income? He's a renowned expert in international energy and an artist.
I was going to say he's a painter.
An artiste.
People are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars
in demand
for his works of art.
Okay, can we talk about the fact that that President Obama is not playing a vocal role here?
Well, he had the initial tweet after the debate, and I think that was it, isn't it?
So Politico reports a bit on this today. Says before Hollywood icon and Democratic donor George Clooney published his buzzy and brutal New York Times op-ed yesterday, calling on Biden to step aside as the nominee, we're told he reached out to former President Barack Obama to give him a heads up. The two men, who are friendly, both attended the LA fundraiser Clooney referenced in his piece, where the actor said he'd beheld a diminished Biden, and that the leader he interacted with was the same man we all witnessed at the debate. While Obama did not encourage or advise Clooney to say what he said, he also didn't object to it. We're told from people familiar with their exchange. The lack of pushback is an eye-popping revelation, given that the former president was one of the first big voices defending Biden following his abysmal debate performance. While many of his former aides have been some of the incumbent's biggest critics, that's a reference to the Pod Save America gang, who are all former Obama folks.
John Favreau.
They've been very tough on him. And I imagine that is also blessed by Obama. But here's the thing. He's the guy with the clout.
Right.
To make a real plan, to make a real push, to speak personally with him. This suggests that he's very passive behind the scenes, and that his being passive he views as plenty for this effort.
It speaks volume. The silence speaks volumes.
But here's the thing. This is an Obama problem.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, he is happy to lead from behind.
Right.
He is not
As he's
making-
always done. This has always been his
what I'm
MO.
s-
People forget. Everyone
this is what
has
I'm
sort of a
saying.
rosy sort of their memories of the Obama years, and they forget these things. But
No, so
you know.
he's in the background. He's sort of getting credit for influencing some of this, but he's not really driving any of this. I looked up what he was doing the other day, and he's like hanging out with the USA Olympic basketball team, which is great. Look, I always said that Obama
ex-president,
was
do
very
whatever he
excited
wants.
to be an ex-president.
Yeah.
That was going to be his sweetest gig,
Right.
and he's very much enjoying it. Fine. But the party does need him to be part of this effort,
Right.
and he's basically declining to do
Right.
so.
They're not turning to Bill Clinton at this point for guidance and sort of the voice of like their the patriarch right now. No, they're turning to Barack Obama.
Let me offer a prediction, which is that once the hard work has already been done and they've fought each other and bloodlet all over the place for the next couple of months, and they come to some sort of agreement about what they're going to do moving forward, Barack Obama will show up at some forum where he's been paid $1 gajillion to speak.
Yeah.
And he will say, well, the Democratic Party had one option here and another option here. And some people wanted to do this option or a more extreme version of it. And some people wanted to do this option or a more extreme version of it. And where we've landed is right here. That's leadership from Barack Obama.
It's
Professorial. He'll sound nice while he says it,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone will be like, "Oh my gosh, look at this elder
he weighs
statesman."
in. The sage.
Everyone else did the work.
Right.
You didn't do the work.
You sounded very much like Selena Myers' political consultant advisor comes in towards the tail end of the campaign, and everything she said, she was so good at this. It is, it isn't. You know, it sort of depends. Well, yes, and both, and no. You know,
I have
whatever
things
you
to
want to hear.
say
Right.
about a lot of things.
Right. You mentioned the line in the Clooney op-ed also that stood out. Obviously, the big one, the bombshell, was the guy that we saw at the fundraisers, the same at the debate. In other words, it's not a fluke, and it just puts the lie to the administration's the spinning of well. He, and it's like John Belushi and the Blues Brothers, he had a cold. He was jet lagged. He was overprepared. My car broke down. I had a flat tire. The tux didn't come back from the cleaners. It was plague. It was locusts. It's not my fault, right?
Not my fault.
Yeah.
It's
really sad.
The direct quote was he was not the Joe Big effing deal Biden of 2010. He wasn't even the Joe Biden of 2020. He was the same man we all witnessed at the debate. Okay. Then you pile on top of this the fact that the White House has been now caught in a very specific lie, Karine Jean-Pierre, about this meeting on January 17th, I believe it was, between 4 people, including the Parkinson's specialist.
Okay.
And it was unclear who the 4th person was, and they kept trying to deflect and not really answer the
HIPAA.
question.
No, we're not telling who's
Right,
there.
it's so private, and there's all these military members who are treated.
They
so
all
we
go to
can't-
the White House
We can't tell
for their medical treatment.
It's like the Minute Clinic over there. You go in.
Urgent care at
You
1600
You
Pennsylvania.
sign up on the kiosk, and you see the president's doctor.
Right.
Everybody knows
Right.
that.
It's
so
great.
they get caught saying like, no, he didn't have meetings with this guy. They're trying to deflect. It turns out the 4th person in that meeting they have now confirmed was President Joe Biden.
Yeah.
So they're lying about this. Not great. Not great.
They could have been talking about Parkinson's awareness.
True. Actually, she tried that. She was like, it was about some legislation.
Yeah. See, I heard that too. Yeah.
Some
Exactly.
legislation.
Okay.
Okay. So then you've got the major, like the up and coming stars and or major surrogates for the Democrats out having no idea what to say. Okay. Now, this I think is a symptom of being coddled by the press.
Yes.
So often.
Yeah. It's great.
Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi, just like Dr. Biden. I want to be.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Speaker
She actually
Emerita.
did her.
Do
in
you
that.
remember? She's Speaker Emerita. That's how her
Yes.
title is.
Speaker Emerita, Nancy Pelosi, thinks she can go on any news program in front of any reporter or anchor and just have a nice morning. That's what she thinks. And frankly, going on Morning Joe, that's a pretty good play.
Yeah.
But I do think they're so used to kid glove treatment that they haven't prepared themselves for the fact that they actually do have to answer some very obvious and hard questions. I will play for you Nancy Pelosi on Morning Joe.
does he have your support to be the head of the Democratic ticket?
As long as the president it's up to the president to decide if he is going to run. We're all encouraging him to make that decision because time is running short. I think overwhelming support of the caucus. It's not for me to say. I'm not the head of the caucus anymore, but he's beloved. He is respected, and people want him to make that decision, not me.
He has said he has made the decision. He has said firmly this week he is going to run. Do you want him to run?
I want him to do whatever he decides to do, and that's the way it is. Whatever he decides, we go with.
So she goes back into NATO performance. Newsflash, Speaker Emerita, he has already decided, which is how she said. He's decided what he's doing.
That's fine, and he can continue to decide. He will have more decisions, including not running. So that was
It's like when you're talking to a pushy person, and you give them a couple of polite deflections, and then you do a firm no, and then they're like, so anyway, let me know what you decide. Okay? Just let me know what you decide.
Yeah, that's right. Even though
I felt like I gave you an answer.
It's car salesman quality. She also snapped at a mainstream reporter saying, am I speaking English?
The audio is not great. I'll play a little bit of it just to give you an idea. She's getting followed in the halls of Congress, which is this is something that happens to every Republican every day.
They get stalked.
Okay, not everyone, because there's 435 people up there, but a lot of them just get stalked all the time. This is the Manu Raju treatment of CNN.
Yeah,
he's always on it in the
it.
hallways. And they don't get this treatment very often. So she's clearly confused about why this is happening to her, and she does not like it. Here we go.
Convey to President Biden what you said this morning.
I'm not having any conversations with you or anybody else about what I talked to the president about, with all due respect.
Do you believe that?
I never do, so it's nothing new.
I understand, Madam Speaker. Do you believe that him waiting so long to make this decision could harm the
I'm not
party?
making any comments in the hallway about the fate of our nation. Okay?
Are you concerned whether or not he can win in November?
I think he can win.
Do you believe he should run for re-election?
I'm not. Am I speaking English to you? I'm not going to be making any statements about any of that right now in the hallway.
I don't know if you can hear that very well, but she gives us a classic Italian hand gesture.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And says, am I speaking English to you? And the reporter, I believe, is Rachel Scott. Is that right?
Yes.
Rachel Scott, who's a young African-American woman. Bless her and her restraint. When she says, am I speaking English to you, you can see her face go. And she almost closes her mouth deliberately, like as if to zip her own lips.
Right. Saying, excuse me.
Retorting in the way that Pelosi deserves in that moment would not go well for a reporter who wants to keep her job. But she's the senior congressional correspondent for ABC.
Yes.
And I would suggest that if a Republican spoke to her that way, that would be a story in and of itself.
Right.
Am I speaking English to you?
Wow. The racism and sexism. I'll just throw that in there.
Yeah.
Spoken like the true daughter of Mayor D'Alessandro. Anyway, I keep on going back and forth, Mary Catherine, with who's winning in this, right? And I know that they're keeping a score as well, the Biden administration, much like Nixon at the end. How many senators do I have on my side? And who's voting for me? Who's voting for conviction? And impeachment, articles of impeachment. And half these people, I helped get elected. And it's the sense of betrayal, so that's happening right now. And one of the more fascinating...
Didn't do McCarthy any good.
No, and know it. That's right.
This is Kevin McCarthy, not the McCarthy of old.
No, not Joe. So the big news, of course, is that they're talking about Senator Peter Welch of Vermont. Now, he's the first Democratic senator now is coming out to say that he needs to step down.
Well, and Michael Bennett of Colorado,
I heard that the other day, and they don't seem to be mentioning Bennett, but I could have sworn it was Bennett and now.
Well, Bennett said something quite critical. We can find the clip of that.
Critical.
My colleague Dana Bash reported that you, Senator John Tester, and Senator Sherrod Brown all said during that lunch that you don't think President Biden can win in 2024. Is that true?
Well, it's true that I said that, and I did say that behind closed doors, and you guys and others asked whether I had said it, and that is what I said. So I figured I should come here and say it publicly.
Why do you think he can't win in November?
I just think this race is on a trajectory that is very worrisome if you care about the future of this country.
And Bennett's interesting because Bennett is he's not a risk taker.
Right.
He's a guy who's lived his whole career being a pretty bland senator to sort of get under the radar.
So that number is now maybe, by the time you're listening to this, we're talking maybe a dozen, right?
Depends how it goes.
And we're waiting for, and leadership, including Pelosi and Schumer, they've left the door open in their sort of vague support, even though Schumer is like, I'm with Joe, but now he's like kind of open to it. On the other hand, the squad, as you know,
I know, surprising
weighed
from
in.
them. Our little revolutionaries are not so revolutionary right now.
Team Biden.
Yeah.
And the only thing I could think of is they like him because he's an empty vessel, and they can just get it because he agrees to a lot.
He certainly does.
That their platform.
This is, by the way, some people have said to me, Biden caves on everything that his base wants.
Right.
So if they want him, if the left side of the party wants him to bow out of this race, eventually he'll get bullied into doing it.
Right.
I'm not sure I buy that because I don't think he cares about issues nearly as much as he cares about himself and his family's future.
Right.
So when the issue is him, I don't know if he's going to be bullied quite as easily.
Right. Again, it's good. Clooney mentions this in the op-ed, how it's going to take this sort of massive intervention for, very prominent, our Democratic leaders, so not just congressmen and senators, but which is, very bold of them to, take that risk. But he's thinking Schumer and Pelosi to say, you need to step down. But you know what? They cannot force him to say it's voluntary.
This is the thing. And who would be the kind of guy who could lead a charge like that? I wonder.
You know, when we talked about, by the way, when we talked about Clooney and everybody there knew it, right? At the fundraiser where Obama takes him by the hand. I want to talk about other celebrities. And what do they know that they're holding back? And only because they're losing. And
this is a
Jimmy
great idea.
Kimmel was on stage.
This is a great idea. Let's take down a bunch of celebrities while we're
right
at this.
now. I'm thinking about Jimmy Kimmel is on stage. This is happening, and he's standing there while Biden is standing there, sort of half frozen, and then Obama takes him by the hand. If you look at, he's got this nervous grin on his face, Kimmel, and clearly he knows. And they go backstage. They know, and they're covering for him.
If you have to be on stage with someone who's that risky on stage, you're feeling it every second.
No, he's got this nervous grin.
Because they have to compensate for it.
And then go back to like Seth Meyers, going with Biden for ice cream and this great little segment they did.
Ice cream and aviators are not going to save you from this situation.
You know what? So enough with that. There's something else I wanted to ask you.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, and I just have to sort of phrase this in such a way. So there's this weird clash, right, between certain Democrats who believe Biden is a threat to Trump is a threat to democracy, right? And now these stories that are coming out of like, other Democrats we've spoken to off the record have told us in the media, you know what, they're fine with Trump.
Yeah.
And they'll get through it. And it's interesting the meltdown that's happening because the people who have always who believe that Trump is a threat, they're angry.
Yes.
And they're angry at the Democrats. They're not angry at being duped. They're like, what? You mean everything you told us was a lie? No, they're angry because they really believe it.
Well, yeah. So that is my question often about people. Is like, do you really think that Trump is going to spell the actual downfall of the United States of America? Because I get it in every election. We say, this is it. This is the most important election of your life. And to some extent, I think that's true. I think Trump has really bad tendencies, January 6th being the obvious manifestation of that. And that can be a dangerous thing.
Right. Have you seen, by the way, I'm sorry.
Ahead. No, go ahead.
I'm cutting her off, everybody. The cover of the New Republic. They melded Trump's face on the cover with Hitler.
Oh, good.
Because this is it.
Okay. So, look, conceded. That very bad. But then you've got the Biden side, who is repeatedly, and Obama before him, used the intel agencies and collusion with government agencies and collusion with media to use all of these levers of power to go after political opponents in the United States of America, American citizens, Trump chief among them. And they have a lot of like freaking terrible economic policies, and everyone's committed to ignoring entitlements. So whatever. There's danger. I understand that. But there is some cynicism here where having Trump in the news is good for business.
Yeah.
And good for a lot of people
sure.
who say he's an existential threat to get paid. So this comes from an exchange between Tim Miller, who's a former RNC guy, and Jeb Guy, who has become a left-leaning, and is he? I don't know if he's a registered Democrat at this point, but a never Trump left-leaning guy. So Ezra Klein says to Tim Miller, and Ezra Klein was a person who, to his credit, wrote earlier than everyone else about how this guy might be too old. Says, you don't know how the party can replace him. You don't want to be blamed for any of this. You just stay quiet and walk the calm path to defeat. I think it's clear people are weighing this set of things. Like, it would be quite unpleasant for me to personally come out against the president as an elected official in a Democratic Party and weighing what will happen if Donald Trump wins and saying in a revealed preference way, I can live with Donald Trump winning. And I've had people say that to me off the record, to be fair. Tim Miller, really? Ezra, I've had top Democrats say to me basically something like, I don't know why all these Democrats who think Donald Trump is an existential threat to democracy are acting the way they are, but the reason I'm acting the way I am is because I don't think that. Tim, who the F is this? Out your sources, Ezra. I'm about to be in leaking text mode over here myself. That's crazy. I guess it's consistent, but it's maddening, no? And Ezra says, I find it maddening too, but I do find it consistent. This is the thing that's always confused me is they're like, democracy's on the line. And then it's like in a video game, choose your fighter. And you've got this feeble old man. And you're like, that's my fighter.
My guy, right.
That's the fighter.
It should be Zangief. And sorry, for people who played Street Fighter, they'll get that. Anyway.
I think you're right. A lot of people don't really buy what they're selling to voters.
But here's the real question, though. But they've managed to convince a lot of people that the threat's real. And if you think about, for example, that cover of the New Republic, which is Hitler and Trump together, like this is going to happen, the end of democracy in America as we know it. The question is, if they really feel that Trump is like Hitler, how far are you willing to go to stop Hitler?
Well, super far, it turns out. Yeah.
So, I mean, that is a serious question.
Yeah. I want to play another clip real quick of Gretchen Whitmer, who is the Michigan governor, who is mentioned always among these picks of who could be the nominee, which, again, there's no plan for getting to this, and I think it's very hard for them because, again, let's run through the timeline. The RNC is next week. The DNC is at the end of August. Okay, so
August,
next week RNC, then the Olympics. Now, in theory, maybe the RNC plus the Olympics timeline could allow Democrats to come up with some fancy plan, but that plan will not include letting voters vote.
No.
That's just a plan for George Clooney to host a forum with Oprah asking questions with a bunch of Democratic governors on stage. So voters can't vote. They can't make that happen. By the time the Olympics are done, you're at the beginning of August, right?
Yes. August 7. August 7 is, I believe, when the virtual roll call is going to take place.
Okay, so then you got that for Ohio. Mid-August is when other battleground states, I believe, such as Wisconsin, have a deadline for getting everything finalized, which, interestingly, the Democrats planned their convention for too late for some of these deadlines. So having an open convention does not allow you to hit the deadlines. Right. They thought they were going to have a normal convention where everything is a fait accompli by the time you get there.
Yes.
So using that as your mechanism also becomes really complicated because you have to get everybody on these ballots. And I just don't think that any of this is feasible. At any rate, Whitmer is mentioned in these nonsense plans. So here she is on The View answering questions.
Oh boy.
Politico reported this. They reported that you told the president's re-election campaign chairperson, Jen O'Malley Dillon, that Michigan was no longer winnable. Did you say that? Because polls show Biden is trailing Trump, but that's been reported over and over again.
Yeah, I didn't say that, and it was a conversation between two people, yet the source was someone who works for someone who may or may not run for president in 2028. I mean, that's the craziest thing to think that there's any accuracy to that. Anyone who knows me knows that I have delivered Michigan over and over again. I won by almost 11 points in my reelect when people were writing my political obituary.
Lost a race.
Correct. And so we got to show up. We got to do the work. It's not going to be easy. But we're not going to clutch our pearls and get all nervous when we're down 2 points. We're not going to celebrate when we're up 2 points. This is Michigan. We do the work, we show up, and we talk about people and what's happening in their lives and how we're going to help them get ahead.
Quick follow-up.
I love, by the way, how Sunny has to show that one of her assistants Googled something this morning and handed her a card that says, "You've never lost a race before." Let the woman talk. She's better at it than you are. Okay. Then the follow-up.
A quick follow-up. You say Kamala is the heir apparent. Would you run for her? Would you run as her vice president?
You know what? I have never looked at opportunities in Washington, D.C. with a lot of excitement because I love Michigan. I love state government because I know when we're feeding 1.4 million Michigan school kids free breakfast and lunch, I can see what it means to people. And that's why I love state government. But you know, I'll never say never, but that's not something that I am angling for.
You'll never say never.
Okay. No, I've made a commitment to serve through my term in Michigan.
Okay. So at the end of that, she should have just stuck with opportunities in Washington are not what I'm looking for. I love serving the people of Michigan. But her ambition and confusion gets to her in the middle of that answer, and she says, I'll never say never.
Harris Whitmer
And I said,
has a nice ring.
I think she and Pelosi both are emblematic of the fact that nobody is on the same page.
No.
They came out of that Democrats meeting the other day going, we haven't figured this out yet.
I mean, that's literally what Steve Cohen, the Tennessee congressman, said walking out of that funereal, as they said, funereal behind closed doors meeting among House reps, which is, are you on the same page? He's the same page. We're not even the same book.
Not even close.
No,
man.
and they said there were tears and not for Biden. So, I mean, and again, can I bring up Jerry Nadler?
Oh, please.
Do you remember Jerry Nadler, the congressman from New York, formerly large, now small, but still formidable? He came out and said that Biden should not seek re-election. And then now he says actually he's on Team Biden again.
Oh, well. Clyburn's been all over the place, too. So James Clyburn is
how much groveling was involved
I know.
for that?
Well,
it's so embarrassing.
Clyburn is of South Carolina. He's viewed.
He delivered.
He's viewed as a sort of a leader of, in particular, South Carolina primary black voters, right? The exact voters you need to become the Democratic nominee, which is sort of what he marshaled in 2020 for Joe Biden, a really important figure in this. He's apparently been on like 3 sides of the issue already.
Yeah.
And it's like somebody needs to send out a press release.
Right. They must be being strong-armed, from all sides. And I think, for example, speaking of Barack Obama, Rahm Emanuel apparently was ruthless about strong-arming members of Congress. I mean, and berating them in saunas.
Rahm Emanuel does not lead from behind.
No, he takes particularly in the sauna. No, just a joke. Oh, just a joke.
That's a dirty one.
That was a dirty joke. No, but all I can think of when I heard that Nadler was back, trying to get back in the good graces of Biden, was NBC's The Office and the episode where Dwight was plotting to take over for Michael Scott, and then he gets outed, and then he's pleading, he's begging mercy, and then at the last thing you see is Dwight standing on top of like a desk holding a giant placard that says traitor, and he has to stand there in shame. And I was like, what did Nadler have to do?
Look, I also sort of sympathize because this is what it felt like going into Cleveland, right? In 2016.
Oh, yeah.
Republicans were split on Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I remain not a huge fan. I have said it clearly throughout, but I'm not an elected official. So I don't have to answer to the voters who voted for Trump. I can just say what I feel. Everybody was in a tricky situation going into that convention. Mm-hmm. And people made attempts to kind of blow things up on the floor. Interestingly, Senator Mike Lee among them, who is now a very big Trump supporter.
Oh, yeah.
Senator Ted Cruz, of course, gave his speech.
Vote your conscience. Right.
Vote your conscience. Nobody was on the same page of the hymn book during that gathering, although Cleveland, very nice place to visit. It was lovely. I was having a lot of margaritas on in downtown. Nobody's on the same page. Nobody knew how to overcome this. No one had a plan. And frankly, again, this is slightly different because the GOP gave voters a full say. Yeah. And the voters very clearly said Donald Trump. The voters have voted very clearly said Donald Trump several times over. Biden shielded from that exercise.
The Democratic Party really made it comfortable for him to just cruise to the nomination, much to their chagrin. Mary Catherine, if Biden makes news next week, the pressure becomes too immense, and he announces that he is going to not seek re-election, stepping all over the Republican National Convention, and usually you get a bounce from that, but with Trump, I'm not so sure. Does that help or hurt Trump?
Look, I think the convention bounce is overrated anyway. it doesn't last that long. It's fine. It's better than having a sink, you know. But I don't think it's like super important. Who knows? I don't know. If Trump can keep it sort of normal as he has been doing, and if he doesn't wild card this VP thing, which look, the finalists all seem basically fine to me. I have preferences, but you know, it's not off the rails.
Right.
He should have a pretty good week after two of the best weeks in my political memory for just Republican.
I know. Just to
shot
sit back,
like not from a country point of view, but from just a political observation point of view. Just sit back and let them do what they're doing.
A friend of mine.
I now know what the Democrats felt like in 2016.
No, that's exactly right. And you have to stop. And John Podhoretz was very funny about this on the Commentary podcast, where he says, you know, I'm gonna go low now, and then he says, I am loving this. And he doesn't support Trump, but he says just the preening and the smugness of the 8 years of having to deal with these people telling me blah blah blah. So he's enjoying it. I got a DM from a friend who out in Hollywood who said, boy, you must be. He says, I always picture you grinning, but you must be grinning more lately. And I thought, I guess. I mean, there's so much going on. Sometimes you don't actually stop and just in a state of wonder. I mean, because it is it's sad for the country, but at the same time, wow, I've never seen been in this position to see another party so completely get split down.
I think it will take time to look back and realize how consequential this was. We have, as I keep telling friends, we have the curse of living in consequential and also extremely dumb times.
Yeah,
that's
right.
That's where we are. Should we do a bit of SCOTUS real quick?
We do. We're all,
okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're almost out of time. The Chevron deference case came down. That's Loper was the name of the case. But it dealt with Chevron deference, which is a case. The deference came from a 1984 case, Chevron versus the National Resources Defense Council.
Yeah.
In 1981, the NRDC sued the Reagan administration's Environmental Protection Agency over the EPA's interpretation of the Clean Air Act. The Supreme Court sided with the EPA at that time, which gave the EPA basically a lot of freedom to issue regulations interpreting legislation. And that the Supreme Court would defer to the perspective of those agencies within the executive branch. Supreme Court's ruling last week?
Man.
In Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo. This is the case which we've talked about before, where the fishermen were challenging the National Marine Fisheries Service, which required these fishermen to pay for regulators to be on their boats with them, and said, hey, this is a misinterpretation of the law, or it's going beyond what is reasonable for interpretation of this law. The lower court sided with the government, gets up to the Supreme Court, and in oral arguments, it seemed like many of these justices seem friendly to saying, hey, the legislature needs to do its work and make clear what the law is, and you can't just let the regulatory agencies run with the ball.
Right.
And indeed, that is basically what came to pass.
Yeah.
SCOTUS said, is 6-3 on this one too, right?
Yes, it was.
6-3, the ideological divide one would expect, saying, hey, legislature, you must make laws clear, giving this much leeway to regulatory agencies under the executive branch is going to violate people's rights, and they need to have clarity from you guys, lawmakers.
That's right. It was the kicking the can down the road, right? That's what they were doing. And they're probably thinking, do you know how many regulations are out there? We don't have time to define with clarity all these can't you let the technocrats decide this? I mean, we trust them. That's what
you know what the founders would say? Do less.
So I was thinking, boy, you've been waiting for this decision for a long time. So how does it feel?
Well, it kind of got totally taken out by the news cycle.
Without it, we'd still be talking. This would be in the news.
I think it is important for Congress to do its job.
Yeah.
And I think that Congress has been laying off its job and responsibility and accountability to a bunch of unelected people for a long time.
Yeah.
And this will come with challenges, but mostly for people who believe that regulatory agencies should have endless power.
Right.
And I don't think that that's smart.
Right. You know, it's like everyone should have known from the outset that that Chevron was going to be a bad ruling. If you've ever seen the movie Ghostbusters, who's the villain? The guy from the EPA.
Yeah, it's true.
But it is, and it's a great victory for small businesses.
Yeah, well, I mean, the idea that these things are Frankensteined into these poor fishermen paying hundreds of dollars a day, I believe, $700 a day
in this particular
to have a
case.
regulator ride on their boat with them. I mean, also, what a gig! Can I get one of those regulator gigs?
No kidding.
No, I'm not going to help. I'm going to sit here on the boat.
Yeah.
And you guys pay me $750. Okay. It raises questions about longstanding operations of the executive branch and regulatory agencies. But the interesting thing is the backlash to this has partly been that the Supreme Court is overstepping by either taking power for itself, which it's not doing, or now there will be court cases, more court cases on this as a result, but taking power for itself, or the weird one is like taking power from the executive branch, which they are.
Right.
Some people have sort of said, oh, the regulatory agencies, treating them as if they're their own branch of government, are being violated. It's like, everyone's co-equal, guys. That's the plan that we have.
It is so funny to see how many people were lamenting Chevron and saying just another, more evidence of the threat to democracy because of the sixth.
When unelected bureaucrats can't do whatever they want.
And that was just only one decision, Mary Catherine.
Oh yes, because we had the immunity one as well, and there are some who, by the way, have said that like the Supreme Court hasn't used the Chevron deference in a while anyway, so maybe it won't have that huge implications. But anything that says to Congress, please do your jobs, I think is a good thing. Then we had the immunity case. Okay, so sort of a mixed decision on that one. I'll read from Carrie Severino at National Review. In Trump versus the United States, the Supreme Court faced a question of first impression about the scope of a former president's immunity, if any, from criminal prosecution for conduct alleged to involve official acts. By a 6-3 vote, the majority crafted a sensible rule balancing the common sense notion that presidents are subject to liability for private actions with the constitutionally inescapable position that presidents must be able to exercise Article 2 power without fear of criminal liability or even probes into their motivations. This is because you don't want, in this lawfare era in particular, every executive to be worried while trying to do the business of the American people and on behalf of the American people think, I'm going to get in trouble for this later and therefore I'm going to limit myself in ways that might be bad.
Right.
Said in the majority opinion, authored by Chief Justice John Roberts, the court noted the threat to a president's ability to do his job boldly if he were immediately faced with a bevy of lawsuits upon leaving office. But the court's holding that translated into an absolute immunity, at least with respect to the president's exercise of his core constitutional powers. That means that going forward, there would be a test, basically, of courts determining, is this thing within the core constitutional powers, or is this outside of that?
That's right. So certainly within absolute immunity, we're talking about foreign policy, defense, national security issues, intelligence. That's definitely absolute. I mean, so it protects not only Trump, obviously, but it protects Biden. It protects Biden in the future, and it protects people like Obama for not being sued for,
droning an American citizen,
droning a 16-year-old, or the wedding,
or whatever. A little bit of a due process issue. Yeah.
Somebody who crosses the border illegally and kills an American. That protects, the family. It protects Biden from being sued by the family for negligence, and obviously, it protects Biden from being prosecuted by Trump. So everyone's thinking about this in a different way. But the fact is, as you said, I mean, it is a good thing because it just, gives the president the power that he needs and not have to worry about second guessing himself based on policies. And the groundwork was laid for this in the civil trial protections in Nixon v. Fitzgerald in '82. That was
Look at
civil,
this guy.
and this
Look
is
at
now
this
criminal.
guy.
I say it now because I'm going to forget it tomorrow, but it's still fresh in my memory. And I was, as you know, the legal correspondent for the Free Beacon.
Indeed.
Yes. And finally, they wanted both. The funny thing is, the left wants it both ways because on the one hand, they say that this turns the president to a tyrant. That's what they're saying. He has this enormous dictatorial power now. And then Chevron came down. They're limiting the power of the executive branch.
Well, the funny thing for me with Chevron too is that they're like, but the experts are the ones who understand, not Congress. And like, although experts should consult with Congress while Congress is writing laws, because Congress can be really dumb about the laws it enacts. First of all, do less. That's a good thing. Experts have not covered themselves in glory in the past 5 years.
Do you remember the experts, the prize-winning economists who Biden touted, who said we are not going to have inflation?
Oh, no inflation. So just to get to the nitty-gritty, which I know our friends on the left care most about, the decision left open the possibility, this is SCOTUS blog, that the charges brought against former President Donald Trump by special counsel Jack Smith, alleging that Trump conspired to overturn the results of the 2020 election, can still go forward to the extent that the charges are based on his private conduct rather than his official acts. The case now returns to the lower courts for them to determine whether the conduct at the center of the charges against Trump was official or unofficial, an inquiry that, even if it leads to conclusion that the charges can proceed, will almost certainly further delay the trial in the case, which had originally been scheduled to begin on March 4th, 2024, but is currently on hold. So the decision in the end is a mixed bag for the cases that are currently being brought against him.
Right.
Some things can likely go forward and some things will not.
Right. And then when Trump becomes president, he'll just dismiss it. So no, but I will say
tyrant time.
It is what they call a presumptive immunity, because this is, Trump dealing with the Department of Justice and telling them make sure every vote is counted and integrity issues. I think that basically protects him from the conversations he's had with the Attorney General and the Department of Justice. Now they're going to the state electors. That's a different story, possibly. And again, all this does is remand it back to the lower courts, where Jack Smith then just has to, with more clarity, be very specific about what the case they're making is, rather than just blanket, we can get them on anything.
Yeah.
They can't. Okay.
Which, by the way, is like, because of this situation where all these actions have been brought, we needed clarity on this. Like, people bag on the Supreme Court for even taking the thing, or for taking time to consider it. And it's like, well, I know that everybody lives in only Trump era. This doesn't just affect Trump. The question of immunity is an important one moving forward, including for Biden or for whomever else they switcheroo in here.
That's right.
By August. We shall see. Okay.
All right.
I don't think we have anything else today. There's a lot.
There were some elections in France and England, but nothing to worry about. Everything's fine. Everything's fine.
We should talk about those at some point as a possible gauge on where we might be headed.
Right.
But
exactly. Oh, by the way, two very quick thoughts related to that was in George Clooney's op-ed. He said, we just, France just did it. They just had 2 quick turnaround elections over there to thwart the far right. That didn't sound good at all. I'm sorry, but all they did by having a far left government, is that what they're saying?
Not just a far left government, but like a
communist
plus
thank
Islamist
goodness.
coalition.
Yeah, thank goodness they
also,
prevailed.
Does he not understand that
a conversation about the election?
We have different processes than they do.
We do?
Yeah, that's a thing.
And he said,
George.
and then again he made, because this is a Democratic talking point, do you vote for one guy or you vote for the convicted felon, 34 felonies, 34 of mislabeling.
How fast is he going to back off of
this
on
a ledger.
once they realize they can't throw him out? How quickly is Clooney going to do a straight to camera? Love that Biden. He's
also, I love how they're like, well, he's not a doctor, but he did play one on TV. Okay. That wraps up this episode of Getting Hammered. Remember, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube. You could follow me on Twitter at Victorina Mattis.
I'm at MK Hammer on Twitter, at MK Hammer Time on Instagram. You can see me on Meghan McCain's podcast on YouTube or where you get your podcasts, and on Honestly podcast and the New York Times. Look at that. I had a big media hit week.
Huge.
Check out the show at Getting Hammered Podcast on YouTube or Instagram. Thanks for getting hammered responsibly. This has been a Nebulous Media Podcast.